This is Sally from Soul Purpose Communication. This week I'm bringing you a slightly different take on our normal sort of episode, because there'll be two of us. I'm talking to my cousin Beverly, and we're talking about our Nan. And this is going to kick off a series of conversations I'm going to have about different sort of women. We're starting off with my Nan, the matriarchal glue in our family. And Bev and I are going to talk about what we remember of her, what sort of woman she was, and what she meant for us as growing up girls, and also how she impacted us as women. I hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks for listening, and well, let's dig in and have some fun. You'll hear quite a lot of laughter. We made the circle about coming back to the website, didn't we?
We did. Yeah, we did.
That's where the idea came from.
I looked at your website. I was so, really proud of you, your journey, knowing where you've been, how you've got to this point and everything you're putting on there. So just this real pouring of love, I think, came out. I just thought, what's the thing that we share, this connection? It made me think of our Nan and her love of baking. And, she was a very wise woman. I just thought, genetically something has come through to your DNA, my DNA, but it's more than just DNA. That makes it sound too simplistic, but I just think we have lots of shared characteristics within us. We're quite similar, but we're also very different people at the same time.
The bane of your childhood was what were you always told?
I was always compared to you. Yeah. Always.
I'm like 6 years older.
Yeah.
It must have been horrible. But Nan, God, I'm wondering, it was not only Nan, but it was her impact on our mothers.
Yeah.
In terms of how they were brought up.
Mm-hmm.
Because your mum and my mum are actually very different.
Very different people, yeah.
And but still the impact of the bringing up they had. It's certainly the cooking.
Yeah, that love of baking. Yeah. I remember it with my mum as well, but I suppose Nan had more time. Nan was there as she was a grandmother. She wasn't having to fulfill that kind of wife-mother role. So her time was endless. And, even being very small, having a chair, up against the counter so that I could reach to do things. It just always being there, this kind of being taught how to make something. And I guess, as I'm older and I can think, well, actually that goes back to the war, doesn't it? Rationing, having to make do amend, having to produce something out of nothing. And I always remember Nan's freezer. Nan was the only person I knew who froze everything. She didn't believe in throwing anything away. So Nan would freeze rice, for example, and then she'd produce a rice salad or something, just little things. And they have really stuck with me, actually. And I'm very much the same. If it can be frozen, it goes in the freezer, this thing of not wasting.
Yeah, because my mum remembers times when Nan would be crying because she didn't have enough money to feed the family. I mean, 4 kids and 2 adults.
Yeah.
There was a sort of constant anxiety for Nan about, was she going to have enough money to feed everyone? Yeah. This is what our grandmothers dealt with.
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to get? What's here? And what am I going to manage to make out of what's here?
And what will my rationing coupons allow me to get?
Gosh, but yeah, the cooking. And the other thing, and I still say it, was Nan's just in case.
Oh, yeah. Just in case. 3 pips.
Apple pie with you on the motorway, just in case.
Well, love her. Because you were given something when you left.
Oh
It
God, yeah.
was Nan would go rummaging in her larder or her freezer, and something would be produced to take something home, basically, just in case. And I can remember when Matt and I had gone up there. This is on a motorbike. She'd given us a jar of jam because Nan always made marmalade. Yeah, so we had a jar of marmalade and what she thought was an apple pie come out of the freezer, wrapped in a newspaper, right, to keep it fresh because obviously something might happen from Suffolk down to Somerset, you know, something might happen. But anyway, we got home and unpacked, and the next day thought, oh lovely, I'll heat that apple pie through, and it turned out to be a sausage pie. And obviously being vegetarian, didn't get to eat the pie. Love her.
Oh,
And I never had the heart to tell her that she'd given us a sausage pie, not an apple pie, you know. So when she found out, oh Nan, your apple pie was delicious, she'd go, thank you so much, but it had actually been a sausage pie.
and the
Yeah.
funny thing of it is that she probably wouldn't have recognised, she probably wouldn't have got out the apple pie from her own freezer and thought, oh, why are there two? You know,
Yeah. Yeah,
she wouldn't
exactly.
even noticed. You know, oh God, there was always the just in case.
Yeah.
Always.
And the three pips, like when you were leaving, going home, or just give me 3 pips so I know that you've got home safe.
Yeah.
And I did it, well, I think until she died, I still did it.
Nan was worried. I mean, if we get to the matriarch point,
Nan was 95 or 96.
and she had her own 4 children,
Yeah.
who had had their brood of 10 children, who had had their children.
She was a great grandmother.
So she was, there was this whole brood of us.
Mm-hmm.
And she did worry about all of us.
Yeah, she did.
Not constantly, but she was aware of what we were doing and where we were and how we were.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
And it didn't seem to me that even though her own children had well and truly flown the nest, it didn't stop her being any less connected.
No, and I think that she relished that. I think it was one of those things that gave her kind of her impetus to keep going, and especially towards the later years of her life, you know, when her mobility was really decreased and she really struggled with arthritis. And, you know, when she left her home and moved in with our aunt and uncle, and that was such a big wrench for her. So it was this feeling of being connected, of still being within the family. Her place was still there, I think, and that was really, really important for her, really important. Yeah.
Somewhere or other, I've got photographs of Jessica and Nan.
We had paper and you asked for some scissors, and Jessica, we quite happily cutting things out, sticking. And I can remember Nan, I remember this clear as a day, being really concerned that Jessica had scissors because she was quite young. And she was really kind of, you could see her kind of keep looking at Jessica, checking on her to make sure that she was safe. And she was really like unsure of your approach, which was, she knows how to use them. I've taught her how to use them.
Yeah.
I remember being struck by the difference in parenting, because, you know, quite rightly, like, here's scissors, you want to cut, this is what you do, you know, fill your boots kind of thing. She was absolutely happy as could be. And there was Nan who was like different generation, who was really, really worried that something bad was going to happen to her. So it was really interesting. Yeah. So it wasn't a big thing.
It wasn't a big thing. I can imagine for Nan, it was a whole other generation.
Yeah, completely.
What we had for our kids, for stuff to do, was way out of the range of what Nan would know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Just in clothes, nappies and everything.
I can remember when Hugh, my eldest son, was very, very young, and that weaning stage, and I was around visiting and mashed him up a banana, and she came out with brown sugar, and I went, what am I meant to do with that, Nan? And she went, put it on the banana, it will help him digest it. And I just howled with laughter. And I was like, Nan, I think a banana's got enough sugar. I'm not going to put sugar on a banana. But for some reason, this had stayed with her, and it was, you know, one of those things.
That's the medical. I mean, they just wouldn't have known, and they didn't have the instinct to look up stuff. You know, so there were all these weird old folklore-y type tale.
Yeah.
And that was very much in that generation. I mean, even as Nan got older, you know, she was still very private about her health things. You know, this thing about
Yeah.
the health stuff is private.
Yeah, very much so. And that deference as well. I think that's the other thing that goes with that generation. You know, doctors, those kind of professional layers within society are there to be listened to. They have the knowledge, they know, therefore we must follow that advice.
I don't have the deference for the advice, but I have a deference for somebody I see as being more superior to me. That deference still is somehow in my system.
It's a funny one, that, isn't it? Because I think for me, it's always been a point of rebellion. It's been a point of rejection. And my mum would say, I don't know where you get that from. She said, I do not know where that comes from. Because it's certainly not from my mum. It's
ironed fucking wallpaper.
It's certainly not from my mum. I think secretly it must be from maybe from my dad
and from Nan.
And from Nan slightly. Yeah, I mean,
there must have been rebellion in her bones somewhere.
You know what? I think there was huge rebellion actually in Nan. To have had a child when she did without being married now, and I know that caused a lot of difficulty, a lot of tension, a lot of heartache. I think she made a brave decision. She did something at a time when that wouldn't have been the norm to do.
And not to marry the father when he gave her the option.
Yeah. You know.
She was really holding out.
Yeah.
For something. I mean, we don't know to this day what it was.
No.
She knew what she wanted.
Yeah.
Or what she didn't want. And she went for it.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
I think that there was huge rebellion in her somehow. I can remember her telling a story about when she was young. It was when her parents were still alive and they were on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
And just what their summers were like when they would have sacks which the grain would go in. You know the story as well?
Yeah.
What my brain remembers is her telling it with her brothers and sisters, which there were many of. They would sit on the sacks to kind of scoot down the hill.
Yeah.
The sacks would like break.
Yeah.
And she'd end up getting a scratch bum because all the stubble from the stalks of the hay scratch all down the back of her legs.
I got taken to that farmhouse on the way down to her sister, on the way down to her funeral. And I'd never seen the farmhouse. And, you know, from these very few pictures that I've ever seen, you know, it's in isolation. It's surrounded by fields. You know, there's no development. And what was, I guess, originally the lane that led to the farmhouse, there's now housing all around it. And the farmhouse looked tiny. It just looked so small. And yet when I remember hearing the stories that Nan would tell about them all living there. So it probably was big for the time. Yeah. And when you see bigger housing surrounding it, it made it look a lot smaller. But yeah, I mean, I remember her telling stories of her mum having help. Yes. You know, there was somebody that would come in and help her mother with the looking after the children, the cooking, the blah, 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 blah. And the washing. And I have a photo somewhere, I'll have to dig it out, of Nan on a telephone. They had a telephone installed. And I think she was a young teenager, so maybe about 13, something like that. And there's a photo of her on the phone. And that would have been a huge thing. So she came from a lot of wealth. And there was a lot of wealth. You know, she did come from quite a privileged place.
And that always stayed with her.
Nan was very proper.
Yeah. And there was always that proper, proper use of your proper nice plates, but there was always that straight backness about Nan.
Yeah.
Just sit properly on your stool, keep your knees.
Yeah. Elbows off the table.
Stop
twiddling with your cutlery, Beverly.
No, but there was always that properness about Nan.
Very much
and always some sort of poshness somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, very much. And I think when I think of Nan, I mean, obviously she came from, was it 12 or 14? I can't remember exactly, but a lot. And there was Nan, and then there were the younger sisters who I kind of knew more than the others, I suppose. So when I think of her, they were all the same, you know, that very turned out. And I remember when it used to go down and stay for the holidays, which were always blissful. It was always such treasured times of doing that. But Nan would get dressed up to go to the shops.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, there would always be a bit of makeup. She'd always put her lipstick on. That's what she did.
Yeah. And it was that generation. Yeah, there was that way that a woman should look.
Very much so.
But having said that, she was the most flexible in her thinking. You know,
she had an amazing grace, actually, an amazing grace and an amazing acceptance, a really kind, loving heart.
Yeah.
You know, she was so open.
Yeah.
I mean, she was just generous with her time, with her affection, and she always made you feel special.
Yeah.
Always. It would always make you feel special, you know. And I mean, even as an adult, I'd phone up and, you know, hi Nan, it's only me. What do you mean it's only me? You know, and she'd turn that back around and she would just be so joyful to hear your voice, to want to know your news. Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was her superpower, I think, making you feel special.
Yeah, very much. Very
much. No matter who you were. And I think if we'd have had all the other cousins on the line as well, you know, they would all have their stories.
Yeah. And the things that she did as well, you know, because obviously, you know, we've got boy cousins, and you know, I remember if you'd go down for a holiday and, you know, the cricket set would come out, you know, that everything, and she'd tailor it to what the cousins wanted to do. I don't know what age she was at that time, maybe in her 60s, I guess. And she would always carry 2 bags, one brimming with food. I mean, you know, sandwiches, cakes, squash, you name it. And they were like these, I always liked them to like Mary Poppins bags, because out would come things to keep you entertained. Not that the beach wasn't enough generally, but, you know, there'd be like I said, a cricket set or a game of pool, and then there'd be this hamper of food, you know, and cake. And if I do remember, if you dropped a sandwich, Nan would give you a fresh one and she would eat the gritty one.
Oh.
I mean, just these little things, you know, and it was quite a trek from her flat down to the beach, and there was a lot of steps, wasn't there, that led down to where the station was. But she always seemed to have this boundless energy, and I think she always used to say to me, it kept me young, you know, it just kept me young. And I think her having the time to do that in a way that she could enjoy all of us as grandchildren differently to how she'd had that with her own children, and the stresses of being
she was working.
Parent.
Yeah. She was working.
Yeah.
And I think she worked until she was 60, 65.
I guess 60, I guess. I mean, that traditionally would have been the pension age for that generation. So I guess, 60, I'm assuming. Wow.
Because when Granddad died, we were tiny. We were about 4.
Right.
And me and my brother weren't allowed to go to the funeral. It was considered not okay.
Not the done thing for children.
Not the done thing. But my mum and dad took us up to the house. And it was in those days when there was a funeral, the curtains were closed. So the whole house was like shrouded.
Yeah.
But we didn't understand what was going on. And I remember going upstairs to go to the loo and seeing Nan's bedrooms, and Granddad's shoes were under the bed. And came downstairs screaming, he's upstairs, you know. So that's what I remember about that. And the whole house, you know, Nan was distraught.
Yeah.
Absolutely distraught.
It must have been a really difficult time, really difficult.
Well, she was young. I reckon she would have been about 55. Granddad was only just retired.
That's what I was about to say, yeah.
She was my age.
Yeah. She was by herself, because that's why we moved back to Ilford and we moved in with Nan.
And I remember when, you know, Nan's funeral, all of us being there.
Yeah.
And the aunts and the uncles and the cousins, and
I think my regret is I just wanted to be able to tell her to go, to let go, because she clung on. You know, although she'd had a really serious stroke, and although there was no coming back from that, and even if she had recovered, she would have been so physically disabled, and she would have hated that for a start. I just wanted to be able to say to her, "Go, just go." You
And
know,
she'd wanted
you've
to go. She'd wanted to go.
yeah,
Liz.
she'd held us all for so long, with her love and her emotional availability, and I just wanted to be able to tell her that it was her time to let go. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And in a way, well, she did in the end. But you
yeah,
are right. She had held us. She had held us.
yeah.
We don't have someone in our family who's doing that now.
No, no, that she was the glue. She was so much the glue, this matriarchal glue, and she's not there. And there is a nan-shaped space. There is a nan-shaped space. She's missed. She is missed hugely, but also remembered so fondly and with so much love, that I think what a legacy she left us all,
Yes.
really. The things that she taught us, just the ways of being. Kindness costs nothing. Just little things. And she's, some of those little things are so right. I mean, she always used to say to me, we'd have quite big philosophical discussions sometimes about various things, and she'd always say, nobody's an atheist, because I was, sort of young, hot-headed. Oh, I don't believe in God, I'm an atheist, and all of this stuff. And she'd say, the first sign of anybody being in trouble, they look to a God. They ask somebody, they ask something that's bigger than them for help. And not that I would admit it as a young teenager, to kind of going, well, she might have a point there. But certainly later on, I was like, you know what, it's kind of true. And whatever you choose to kind of wrap it up with, if you're Christian, Hindu, Jewish, Muslim, I think for me, it helped me find a place with spirituality that could let go of the patriarchal religion and the organized religion and the abuse that has gone with a lot of organized religion, and find something that sat with me, that made sense to me. And she helped me discover that in more ways than I think she ever realized, but certainly did. Yeah.
That was the whole thing. The helping people discover stuff that in the moment you didn't know it yourself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then later on, and that it was all these seeds. I mean, if
Yeah.
it's all, and maybe that was her vision.
Well, it would make sense, being amazingly green-fingered and a gardener. Do you know what I mean? I think you'll probably hit the nail on the head there. I think it was about planting seeds, and she got to see some of those grow. And I think she left this world knowing that she'd planted well.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And the seeds will reseed.
Yes. Yeah.
Because Jessica, my daughter is baking.
Yeah.
And I find myself saying stuff that, my mum told me that Nan would have told her.
Yeah.
And there's this link through the years.
Yeah.
And it's actually is even before Nan.
Well, yeah, the things that she would have been taught, and I don't know much about her parents or her grandparents. I know all I remember is her telling a story of her grandmother was, well, she would have been a Victorian woman, and Nan said she was always a bit fearful of her, because she was very upright, very dressed in a certain way, very kind of like slightly distant, I think, and that obviously made an impression on Nan. And I think she was so the opposite of that. So kind of what it had felt like for her to have this grandmother that felt unapproachable, actually, that you were taken to visit, and that there was a certain expectation of children were not seen unless spoken to, that kind of thing. And she was the complete opposite to that, the total opposite. She loved babies, she loved children, she was just, yeah, so giving, and would always be so excited if someone was having a baby, you know, whether it was one of her direct relations or if it was a friend or a neighbor or an aunt or whatever, you know, she always had that kind of new life, you know,
Yeah,
this
yeah.
springing of new
And it was,
life and things coming full circle.
you're right, because it was always Nan who kept me in touch with which of the cousins were having babies.
Yeah, yeah,
Always Nan. I never heard it from my own mother. It was always Nan. Go, oh, I just
yeah,
got a baby. Oh, look, look, look.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, very much
yeah.
so. Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, she
mm,
loved that.
mm.
It really
Well, I
gave her
think
so much joy.
it's also the new seeds. It's the new. It's she. I think she had a sense of family as well. She wanted the family to go on.
Yeah, very, very strong sense of family, I think.
Well, her own
And
was so ruptured.
it was incredibly splintered, wasn't it? You know,
She
there
was
was
kind
kind
of
of like, there were groups of sisters that she was still very close to. There was estrangement. There was a lot of bitterness, I think, as well. You
yeah,
know, there'd been a lot of stuff having been done to her and her younger siblings,
yeah,
that she'd had no control over.
yeah,
You know, things had just happened and her
yeah,
life had changed beyond all recognition. And I wonder if those things were also part of her force for families being very connected and
oh,
together.
I'm
You know,
sure.
I'm sure
Yeah.
had a massive impact.
But there was never, I never got any sense of bitterness from that. So, you know, this thing like, you know, because her parents died when she was 13, was it 13?
Yeah,
Yeah.
13, yeah,
And
yeah.
her life changed, you know, literally within 6 months. But I never had any sense of, well, it could have been different if, you know, you know, never any wondering about what her life might have been like.
I'm not sure there's so much wondering about what her life would have been like. I think it was some of the things that happened from some of the older
Oh,
brothers
yeah, okay. Yeah, I know
that
that.
caused
Yeah,
the bitterness.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, the stories that she would tell, you know, about like Sutton Seeds and, you know, Fords of Dagenham being built on land that the family had owned. I mean, she was actually very proud of that, you
yeah.
know, incredibly proud of some of the social good that had kind of come out of having that connection. Yeah.
Yeah. Should write a film out of it.
You know, because it's an amazing length of life to have lived. But I was also always really fascinated about the changes that she'd seen. You know, the fact that, you know, she could remember a telephone. She remembered Zeppelin balloons
Yeah,
going over and things like that.
yeah. Grateful. I'm grateful that I had this now.
Yeah. I wouldn't have changed her for anything. You
No,
know, I absolutely blessed to have known her. Yeah. An absolute gem of a woman, you know, really strong, wonderful being.
mm,
Yeah.
mm, mm, mm. Lovely. I think in terms of our recording, I think the circle's beginning to close. Is there anything you might want to add on?
She's someone that I just remember with love and joy. And, you know, memories of her bring me joy and happiness. And I think that's an amazing legacy to have been left.
This is Sally for Soul Purpose Communications.